is linked with my profession because I'm a psychiatrist, so I'm a doctor to begin with, but I specialize in psychiatry and understand mental health and deal with mental health closely, or the human psychology for that matter. So I'm going to focus on understanding or creating an understanding of the brain, and then apply that information and knowledge to the concept of road safety. Now, the human brain, as we all know, is capable of great innovation. I mean, we have sent man to the moon, we have got satellites in space, we have got a space station, we have created transportation, information technology innovations over the past 2 or 3 decades. So we have great capacity for creating some magnificent things. Despite this, human suffering is very high. And the reason for that is that whilst we do have incredible intellectual ability, we don't always use our intellectual ability in the best possible way. And what determines success is not the intelligence per se or one's educational background, but how we manage our emotions. That is what determines success. And I think success, I use this term very broadly. I don't mean, whether a person goes on to achieve wealth or a degree or a post-graduation in a certain field. I mean to apply it to all aspects of one's life. So as a family, how functional, how successful we are as a community or a neighborhood, and then, as a state or a nation as well. Now, to understand the human brain, it is worth thinking about our evolution, because we have evolved from lower primates, and ape is quite a key one amongst our ancestors or predecessors. And there is this rather famous quote from a neuroscientist, Mr. Ramchandran, which basically says, any ape can reach for a banana, but only humans can reach for the stars. So there is that distinction. But despite that distinction, we tend to sometimes operate and function very close to lower primates or animals. So how do we understand the human brain? It's better sometimes to make sense of it if we have understood the animal brain itself. And the animal brain is quite a straightforward, simple structure. So we have the primitive brain structure at the top, and then the spinal cord basically going down our backs. And it is programmed to work in a very simple, straightforward manner. So when there is an input, there is going to be an output. There is no thinking gap here. There is no thinking capacity for the animal. It is all programmed. Habits are cultivated over time, and some of these programs are innate or inborn. For example, if there was a dog and the dog gets the input that the bladder is full, it's going to have an output which is to go and wee or pass the urine. At the most, you could have programmed it and conditioned it as to where it might do the job. Similarly, if there was a cat in front of me and I decided to take a pin and pricked its paw, the output is going to be instantaneous. It's automatic. It's reflex. And the output will be to firstly pull the paw away reflexly, and then it might give me a glare, it might run away, it might try to scratch back in anger. So the functioning of the animal is fairly straightforward and simple. When there's an input, there's going to be an output. The primitive brain on the top is responsible primarily for emotions. So I like to call it the emotional brain. And as you can see, the emotions, there are a few very basic fundamental emotions that the animals experience, and it is about survival. So when there is fear, we have to remember the emotion always comes first and is followed by the behavior afterwards. So when there is fear, we run, we hide, we escape, we avoid that situation. When there is anger, we attack, and attack verbally, attack physically, sometimes only through gestures. And then there are other kinds of emotions as well that can be experienced by the animals, but humans as well. Happiness is one of them, sadness another. And there is something called hedonism, which we need to bear in mind, which is our need for instant happiness, instant gratification, instant pleasure. We want we don't like waiting for things. We want everything to be quick. And that has become part of our culture more and more now in the past 30, 40 years, particularly the last 10, 15 years. It's the generation of X Factor and Pop Idol and instant fame, instant wealth, as has been propagated through the media and television. So how do we tend to function? We tend to function, as I say, input, output, and then largely driven by the emotions. And that's the part of the animal brain which we have kept with us. And I will come to it in a while again. Now, in the animal world, or all living things, we have certain biological reflexes. So we are born with them. So sucking reflex, a newborn baby doesn't have to be taught how to suck. It will get its milk, it will draw it almost instantly. Some reflexes, however, we have to learn. And how do we learn them? There are certain methods, that the brain utilizes. So going back over 100 years, there was a Russian scientist by the name of Pavlov. He earned the Nobel Prize for his work on conditioned responses and conditioned stimuli. And one of the experiments he conducted was quite a simple one. So Pavlov had a dog. And what he did with the dog was he decided that before presenting the dog with any food, he's going to ring a bell. So the bell came first, then the food. So ding, 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 food, ding, 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 food, ding, 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 food. And he does that religiously for several weeks and then decides to play around a little bit. Right? And what he now starts to do is he will vary things. So he will go ding, ding, ding. There is actually no food, but the dog was responding now to the bell as if it is time for food. You put a stethoscope on the dog's tummy or the abdomen, and you could hear the tummy rumble away. The dog was salivating, and it didn't matter that the dog might have eaten only an hour or so ago. So there was this conditioning or a paired association that was created between the bell and the food. So the bell basically represented food. That is one of the key ways the brain tends to learn. The other methods that the brain utilizes is it uses reward and punishment as two mechanisms by which it might start to create its own habits and learn. So a great number of experiments have been done with a great number of animals, commonly mice, but you can take virtually any animal, and on YouTube, if you explore, you'll find some wonderful, very interesting experiments on these concepts. So with the mice, what they did was they put them in a maze. At one end of the maze was a paddle, and the mice were allowed to wander about the maze. And accidentally, initially, to begin with, purely by accident, they happened to touch the paddle in one corner of the maze. The moment they touched that paddle, the food was dropped into the cage. So it was a reward. And soon the mice came to realize that every time they touched the paddle, they get a certain reward, which is the food. And it was being quite a nice experience, a rewarding experience, a happy experience. The mice wanted to do more of it because what we like, we want to do more of. So that is how a habit was created, or a conditioning was created. And equally, you could do the opposite. So in a different experiment, similar maze, but this time when you touch the paddle, the floor of the maze gets electrified. There's a small current passing through the floor. And it's a form of a punishment, a punitive, horrible experience. No one likes pain, right? And what we don't like, what we fear, what causes us discomfort of any kind, we want to run away from it. We want to escape. We want to avoid that situation. So these mice very quickly learn to distinguish between the paddle that causes the punishment and the paddle that gives them the reward. How else do we learn? We learn through past experiences, and we learn through copying others. And when it comes to copying others, I'm going to narrate a little story to you. So on one of the islands in the Pacific Ocean, they realized long time ago that all of a sudden the pelicans on their shores were starting to die in very big numbers. They couldn't quite figure why that was happening initially. So they brought in all sorts of experts, marine biologists, vets and so on, statisticians, doing all sorts of analysis. And they realized that what was happening was the pelicans had started to die from the time they had banned the tuna fishermen from fishing the tuna. So they weren't affected by an infection. There was no disease. They were essentially starving to their death. And the only association or connection they made was that the fishermen had been stopped or banned from fishing the tuna. Now, they had been fishing tuna for hundreds and hundreds of years here, and they were fishing it in such large numbers that the tuna was going to go extinct. So to create an environment of sustainable fishing and revive the tuna numbers, they had decided for 3 to 6 months, we're going to ban tuna fishing, let the numbers get better. And that was all they were hoping for. No one had ever thought that suddenly it's going to affect the ecosystem in such a way that the pelicans are going to start dying. What they realized was that the pelicans on that particular island for hundreds and hundreds of years had got used to the idea that the fishermen would come with shiploads, deck loads of tuna. The good quality tuna was going to the markets, whereas the poor quality tuna, which was not worthy for the markets, was being left behind on the shores, on the ship decks, and the pelicans would swoop down, have their grub, go away. So they had never known how to hunt and locate their own food. But they were dying now because of lack of food. So what they decided to do was they looked around, and across other islands and the European shores, there were pelicans. They clearly knew how to hunt their food. So they decided to bring in a few, few hundreds of them from other places. And literally within 48 hours, the native pelicans, which were otherwise dying, started to thrive. Now, you can imagine how that might have happened. I mean, if this was an interactive session, we would have had a dialogue right now as a group to brainstorm what's gone on here. But very quickly, people, when I do this as an interactive session, tell me, surely the pelicans, the ones that were dying, have started to copy. And through copying, they have learned, how to hunt food and locate their own food. And that is precisely what had happened. The good thing about this example is that we can, we use copying, mirroring, mimicking as forms of learning. And just as we can accumulate old habits, we can get rid of them or override them by learning new habits. We can upgrade our software, as it were. We are not, our script is not written for life. We can change it. We have that capacity and the power to be able to do that. So the human brain, over that emotional brain, on top of that emotional brain, we have the frontal, prefrontal, parietal cortex. So that's where this unique ability to use language comes from. We can use logic. We have the analytical skills, organizational ability. We can plan and sequence our events. And we have a powerful problem-solving ability. And the most important thing is we have the ability as humans to make conscious choice. We are not always driven by habit alone. We can move away from habits. We can cultivate new ones or disregard old habits at will. We have that ability, but we don't always use it. So this capacity for Vivek Buddhi or conscious choice is very unique to humans. If there was a dog listening to this conversation that we are having through this webinar right now, and the dog gets an input that its bladder is full, the dog doesn't have the ability to make a conscious choice, which is that, fine, this is quite an interesting topic. It probably will go on another 15-20 minutes, and then there will be an interesting Q&A, hopefully. Now, the dog cannot do all that. It's going to have to respond to that input immediately. It's going to go and wee. humans have the capacity to suspend everything else and focus on what they want to focus on. We can make a conscious choice. So right now, you might be in the background having thoughts of working out what's happening in the evening, dinner plans, and so on and so forth, or plans for the forthcoming week in terms of your business and work. But we can make a choice to put that all aside. We can set it all aside. That's very unique to humans. But despite that, we experience a lot of failure. And the reason why that happens is that we have that animal within us. We have inherited it. The emotional brain, the spinal cord are very much part of us, and we rely on it much more than actually the thinking brain. So we rely on cultivating habits and living our habits on an autopilot. Okay. So past habits, beliefs, and emotions on a day-to-day basis, minute by minute, tend to dictate our action rather than conscious thought. When we wake up and go about our chores, morning chores, brushing our teeth, having a cup of tea, breakfast, we are not constantly thinking minute by minute consciously how we are going to go about it. We don't say, get out of the bedroom, turn right, go to the sink. We do it without even realizing. So we are basically programmed, and we live our programmed lives to a large extent. And I'm going to now show you a video that demonstrates how the human brain can be programmed fairly quickly. And if you get a chance and opportunity to watch Darren Brown, if I remember his name correctly, a magician from UK who exploits these brain's vulnerabilities and tricks people into conforming socially. Those videos are worth watching, but I'm going to show you a quick one, and hopefully you find it interesting.
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? For just 3 beats, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away? Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone, and nobody is watching her except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
And they'll be out in just a couple minutes. Thanks so much.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning.
Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm like excluded. Once I decided to go with it, then I felt much more comfortable.
Conformity is how we become socialized, but it can also cause us to develop bad habits or repeat past wrongs. And it's why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense, eventually joined the ranks.
So you can see that it's very easy for the human brain to be pulled into socially conforming, copying others, participating and doing what people are doing around you. And just to also give more of a flavor of how the emotional short circuit takes over our lives and affects us significantly. Yeah, I can think of a few examples. I grew up in Bombay. There's the buses over there and the trains over there, very unique experiences. We all are on our own autopilots, but I'll keep it short by just thinking about or sharing a different example with you, which happened in the US. So there was this sort of middle-aged couple. They were off to a wedding reception. They asked if their daughter, who was about 16 years old, wanted to go with them, and she said, no, thank you. She didn't want to go with them to the wedding reception. So they said, we are going to be late coming home, perhaps past midnight, and it would be better if she went away and stayed for the day overnight with one of their aunts. And that was what was agreed. So the day finishes, they have had a lovely time at this wedding reception, meeting, greeting other people and family, and they have now come home about 2 o'clock in the morning. And the man puts the key, turns it, enters the hallway, and as he enters the hallway, he hears some footsteps above him, right? Now you can imagine what is going on through this man's brain and mind, and he's thinking, no one's meant to be home. The daughter is meant to be at the aunt's place. Surely this has to be perhaps an intruder or a burglar of some kind. Emotionally, there could be fear, there could be anger. How dare someone who is not meant to be here, intrude my property, get into my apartment or flat or home? There might be fear for your life. There might be a mixture of these emotions. But this is America, and you know what is very common in most American households. And so he goes to a cupboard, gets his gun out, and decides he's going to go up and check on who this burglar is and give them a piece of their mind, right? He walks up, and as he is exploring each room, suddenly he finds a shadowy figure lunge at him, all right? And he goes bang, bang. And then he puts on the lights, and, he's just absolutely shocked that he's actually, fired bullets on his own daughter. So she never went to the aunt, right? She stayed back and then decided he's going to play a little prank on the parents and do a bit of peekaboo. Now she's 16, but she is very much in charge. Her emotional brain is very much in charge, wanting to play a prank, have some fun, play a joke on her parents. You can, on the other hand, see what was going on with the father was his emotions had taken over. And rather than be thinking through the situation, stepping out of the home, calling for police assistance, checking out, and doing all sorts of other problem-solving behaviors, he was completely, his actions and behaviors are completely at the mercy of the emotions rather than the ability to think straight and logically. And we see that through examples of road rage on our roads on a daily basis. You find someone cutting across, people start swearing at each other, there's arguments, there's fist fights, and those are pretty common scenarios for us. The potholes, we see a pothole in front of us. What we want is safety of our own vehicle. We don't want it damaged. We don't want to be spending money on repairs. So when we see a pothole, those things take over. our thinking, emotionally, there is a fear of something horrible happening to the car and the pain associated with having to repair it and so on and so forth. So what do we do? Where there's fear, as I said, emotion first, then behavior. When there's fear, we run, we escape, we hide, we avoid. And so we maneuver and swerve across to avoid these potholes, sometimes without even thinking about what's going on around us. And we might do that impulsively and cause accidents. The other way, that video, the 3-minute video we saw, that woman getting initially conditioned, conforming to what everybody else is doing. She felt the need to do it, and then everybody else follows through. That very much is going to affect us and affects us day to day as well. So you yourself put yourself in a situation where you're at the red light, you are stopping behind the stop line, everybody else behind you and alongside is honking, egging you to go on, break the red light and go forward. What do we start to do? We start to go with the flow of the larger population. And if on the whole, the culture of our roads is to break the red light, go ahead, proceed beyond the stop line, even when the red light is showing, what we feel the pressure and we start to break the rules ourselves. So we start off wanting not to do it, but we end up doing it. I said hedonism earlier on, part of the emotional brain. We want everything instantly. We want instant pleasure, instant gratification. Everyone wants to get home early for their dinner, get to the party quickly, get to the movie on time. We want to not miss the match, the cricket match, the finals, or the T20 that might be on, right? Haste and impulsive behaviors are associated with that, but it is very self-serving, usually. So the emotional short circuit affects us on a day-to-day basis, but makes us vulnerable on our roads, affects road safety or compromises road safety heavily. Here's the distinction between the lower order functioning and the higher order functioning. So lower brain structures, the lower order functioning, we are driven on an autopilot. Everything is determined by any programs that have been created through our past experiences or the conditioning, that I described earlier on. It is very different to the higher order brain functioning, which can think of the future, which can think beyond the here and now. Lower order brain functions do not allow us to be able to, have any kind of foresight. And essentially, it's driven by emotions as well, rather than logic. So when it comes to road safety, I think of CHANAKYA NITI and its connections with the emotional hygiene, emotional resilience, emotional first aid, and overcoming short circuits. So there's 4 concepts Chanakya put forth in Chanakya NITI: Sam, Dam, Danda, and Bhed, as we know. So Sam is education, educating the brain and creating the right habits. How do we, alongside the education, what do we use to create those habits? We use rewards and we use punishment. And then Bhed is distinction. So politically for Chanakya NITI, it was divide and rule sort of a concept. But here I'm applying it more broadly. Here I'm going to say Bhed as in create distinction through use of engineering and technology. So let us see some examples. So when it comes to education, the earlier we get that education going, the better. Before all the wrong habits are inculcated and introduced to our children, we want them to learn all the right habits first. Then the quality and the consistency of that education is vital as well, because practice makes perfect, as we know, and we have to practice repeatedly. So you think of Roger Federer, and people like him who have achieved excellence in their own sporting worlds or professions, right? Roger Federer must be practicing that forehand, the service, the topspin, and whatnot, day after day, month after month, without stopping. You can't say, I got good at my forehand 10 years ago, I don't need to practice again. Practice makes perfect, but practice and refresher training and keeping on doing it consolidates the habits, and it becomes more and more innate for us. So we have to have the understanding of the theory, but you have to apply it. So there's no point learning the concept of buoyancy. That's physics. We can read a textbook and understand what buoyancy is. But to actually experience buoyancy, we have to put ourselves in a swimming pool. And then we have to learn the right techniques, the right strokes, and the right way of floating on water, right? So we have to teach emotional hygiene, and the concept of emotional intelligence should be introduced. In my view, as a child psychiatrist, I always argue it has to be part of school curriculum. But here, in relation to road safety, we have to make it part of the curriculum when it comes to teaching driving. Learning to drive should not be about just operating the clutch, brake, and accelerator. And that's it. That is all that I required to demonstrate in a 2-minute test, if I remember correctly, in the 1990s when I got my driving license in Bombay, right? It has to be far more than that, as I realized when I came to UK. So in UK, this is the highway code. The blue one is the most modern official avatar of it, available as a free download. I happen to have sought permission successfully from the Crown Copyright to translate it in any language. I haven't had the time to manage to do that or complete that project yet. If there are volunteers, I would be more than happy, to get that project underway. But the first highway code in red was published in 1931. And the statistics are very glaring. So before 1931, UK had about 2 million odd vehicles. And those 2 million odd vehicles contributed to 7,500 deaths per year on the UK roads. So it was as unruly, you might say, as it is currently perhaps on our streets and roads in India. They then introduced the highway code in 1931, and then soon after, theory tests, practical tests. The theory test now has got videos in it. You have to, they are timed, and you have to, at the correct moment, use the space bar to identify the hazards that the video is showing, and you're meant to spot. So the hazard perception tests are part of that as well. You now have to demonstrate use of satellite navigation technology as a part of the test. So they have made it more and more stringent. And the pass rate is 40% on first attempt, right? So majority people in the UK have to pass only second or third attempt. So you start to value that license dearly. You have not paid someone a few thousand rupees to acquire the license. You value it because you have worked very hard to acquire that license. Now, what has that done? In UK now there are more than 30 million vehicles, but the number of deaths have halved. This 3,500 deaths is still too many, and they want to improve the road safety further and bring it down as low as possible. That's what they are working towards, right? Making the tests more and more stringent. In contrast, what has happened in India is we have got a massive population, of course, but if you extrapolate the figures, UK has a population 60 million. In India, like for like, we should have perhaps 52,000 deaths if we thought that our infrastructure and everything was similar to UK. But we have far more deaths than that. We have more than 3 times that number every year. But the cost is even higher because these are deaths. What about people who ended up with brain injury, spinal cord injury, were paralyzed for life, lost their eyes, lost their hearing, and so on? So it's going to affect livelihood and economy of the nation, isn't it? So the costs are massive. The test requires a driver to demonstrate certain maneuvers in the UK. So you have to be able to demonstrate, a 3-point turn, emergency, how you apply emergency brakes, how you negotiate roundabouts, reversing around the corner, reverse parking, parallel parking, lane changing, concepts of defensive driving, which is watching all mirrors, mirror signal maneuver as a routine, tire and tarmac rule. There's a lot of those concepts of defensive driving which are not part of the typical driving instruction that we get in India, and you have to demonstrate all that successfully to pass in the UK. Then the rewards element is important. So, in UK, after you achieve your driving test and pass result, you can take more training to get what is called a Pass Plus certificate. Now, if you have a Pass Plus certificate, that means you have perhaps become even a better or a safer driver. You show that certificate and the insurance company is going to give you a discount. Year after year, if you have no claims, if you have not had an accident, if you're a safe driver, the insurance company is going to give you a no claims discount. Nowadays, what the insurance company is also doing is they are saying, we want to know what kind of a driver are you? Are you a good one or not a great one? So they offer to put a tracker on your car, and that's logging. That's like a black box basically on a plane, except it's now on your car, and it's logging all the details that on a 30-mile road, if you're going 35 miles or 40 miles, if you're taking wrong turns and going into one-way streets, if you're going against the flow of the traffic, right? All sorts of these things are being logged, and algorithms are generating your profile, and then the insurance company is determining whether to reward you or punish you by increasing your premium. But what is more rewarding than being humane? We felt bad, didn't we, as a nation? There was lot of sympathy and empathy for that elephant and the horrible, way it was injured by the firecrackers put in a watermelon, right? Why don't we show, the same level of empathy on our roads? That is part of our culture, isn't it? We are meant to be proud of our Sanskriti and Parampara, but we don't. We don't respect the pedestrian. We don't respect the children. We don't respect our elderly when they're crossing on our streets. We do not respect the rules of the road. So as per Indian Road Congress norms, the zebra has a specific meaning. Zebra without signals means pedestrian has a right over the cars, over all motor vehicles. But we don't conform to those good habits, right? But when we start to do that, it itself feels very rewarding. So we have to go back to incorporating the concept of value of life. When we are teaching driving to our new learners. So you take the truck drivers on our highways, out of sight, out of mind. They have their front headlights working, but they will not have their back lights working. That is one of the prime things for safety. And accidents happen because drivers driving at a much faster speed behind them on heavily loaded trucks do not notice there's a truck in front of you on on our dark roads where there might be no electricity, where there might not be street lights, and they crash into these trucks. So if we valued life, we wouldn't just be thinking about what can I see in front of me, and that's what is important. It doesn't matter if my backlights are working or not. So we have to do that. And as I say, our road safety means economic benefits. If your roads are safer, we don't need as many trauma centers. We can devote a lot of that money instead to other health specialties or other industries. Danda or punishment, as I say, where there's fear, we are going to run, we are going to hide, we are going to avoid. And it is important to have effective punishment. So if the punishment was quick, timely, and proportionate, then we are definitely going to find change will be faster. In India, for a long time that this has been ignored. I know that the new Motor Vehicles Act has increased the number of fines and so on, but again, implementation is going to be the key. And then Bhed, which is to bring about that distinction of engineering. We are conditioned from early life. Red means stop, amber means caution, green means safe. we have to use that conditioning, create road markings and signals. Again, Indian Road Congress follows UK, almost 99% of it is the same, right? But we do not have signage on our roads to consolidate and reinforce what good habits we might learn when we are learning to drive. So I'm just going to finish off with a handful of snaps to demonstrate how engineering can be psychologically very powerful. So the red line, the red lane, makes it so much obvious. And then if it is backed up by CCTV and then hefty fines, no one will dare encroach on your bus lane. The yellow box, you open Indian Road Congress norms, you'll find what the yellow box is supposed to be. But if you ask 9 out of 10 drivers on the roads today what that yellow box represents in India, they will not have a clue what it is. So we have to teach, but also have the signage there to reinforce and keep it alive. Again, here the distinction is drawn through colored tarmac. So the distinction is that the one to the left is your exit road to a town, whilst the remaining cars will continue on the motorway or the highway going towards London. Now, this is vital because you're not going to always see the signage. And in fact, as you can see in this photograph, the signage is blocked by overgrown trees. If you look at our norms in India, that triangle and 2 hashed lines means give way. In fact, this pole here will have the exact information as well, right? But we don't see any of this signage on our minor roads coming and joining into the major road. Why is that important? Because when I'm coming from this road, I am distinguished. I'm meant to know I'm a minor road user, and the people who are already the drivers, the vehicles already on the major road are the major road users. That distinction is very important for road safety, because how do we determine who gives way? But we don't teach this, and our signage is missing. This is an experimental design in St. John's Wood in London. I know it's been tried in 1 or 2 places in India, including Delhi. This is just a 3D way of painting your zebra. It makes it feel like it's elevated for a driver, but it is a visual cue and a psychological ploy to get that driver to slow down. And then pedestrian refuges, which are basically missing on our streets in India. But you can see that they have all been planted strategically over here in what is largely a residential zone, where people would be expected to cross over. Now, you add them at strategic points and it prevents the rat race and the mindless right turns and left turns that people tend to take in India, the shortcuts, because it's very hard to actually maneuver and safely. It's more dangerous to be impulsive now. You have to try and get into the right places to remain safe. So the engineering creates that distinction between different road users and improves road safety. So in summary, the 3 E's, as I always like to call them, education, enforcement, engineering, they are vital. It's a jigsaw puzzle. You can do a 1,000-piece jigsaw, and if you realize that last piece is missing, it's not going to work. We need all of it to come together. So education to begin with, enforcement, because that's connected with rewards and punishment, and then finally engineering. So we have to cultivate the right habits through timely education, reinforce them, and consolidate. And I think on that note, I'm aware I was supposed to keep it to 40 minutes, and I hope I have managed to do that, but it allows us time perhaps for a Q&A. I know that a number of people on the call right now themselves have been involved in a lot of projects around road safety and improving aspects of our lives, daily lives in India. And I'm sure we'll have a lot to share as well through the interaction that I'm looking forward to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. That was quite illuminating, actually. So based out of Bangalore. I don't know if you have had the, I can't say the pleasure or the horror of driving in Bangalore traffic, which I think is one of the worst right now in India. There's a ongoing joke which says we drive on what is left of the street. That is one of the biggest challenges, I guess, for us to be able to reach to the Western method of traffic rules and following discipline. I think we have a long, long way to go. I hope,
True.
yeah, things will change.
Yes, I feel optimistic. I'll tell you why. Because 2 weeks ago I did a similar presentation, and it was for the new recruit to the RTO officers in Maharashtra. So there were about 150 to 200 people newly recruited as RTO officers. A lot of them are, I'm told, graduates, even postgraduates applying to those jobs. So we are hopefully going to get a lot more skilled manpower entering these very crucial roles. There was already a discussion in that meeting from 2 weeks ago on introducing CCTV, which I'm sure is happening in Bangalore, along with automated number recognition technology and automated fines and so on. So hopefully it will all come together. It is not going to happen overnight. But as I say, it's a jigsaw. We can't expect technology to change everything if we don't educate. And equally, the enforcement is vital.
True, Doctor. Do we have any questions? I think.
Sandhya, madam, can I come for a minute?
Sure, Mr. Lakshman, please. Professor.
Yeah. Sir, your presentation was wonderful. And my name is Professor Lakshman. I'm around 73 years youngster. And I only enjoyed the comment of Sandhya, madam. But having worked as a marketing manager and started my career in Tamil Nadu, having traveled all over India and other parts of the world, I can only say that anyone come from the starting, they will say, oh, Madurai is the worst. If somebody can drive in Madurai, they can drive anywhere. Then when I came to Bangalore, I said the same thing. When I went to Delhi, I said the same thing. When I went to Calcutta, I said, oh, worst. If somebody can even walk here, he can do wonders. So, by and large, I do agree that people keep blaming. And I also see in my own life, when I was a pedestrian, I called cyclist bad. When I bought a cycle, I called pedestrian bad. When I bought a two-wheeler, I said cyclists are the worst. When I bought a four-wheeler, I said two-wheelers are worst. It keep on changing. But we need to understand and appreciate. And with the type of country we are, we need to regulate, especially the licensing authority, which you talked about, RTO youngsters coming up. And if they can be very strict, I think things will improve a lot, sir. Once again, wonderful presentation, sir. Enjoyed very much, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
Dr.
you very much,
Adiraj.
Oh, sorry. Okay, someone else is talking. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm Luke here. Dr. Adiraj's presentation was very good. Indeed, I think we have two fundamental defects. Our signages are far too inadequate. That is, highway furniture, it's almost absent. And number two, corruption. This flourishing corruption and also needs to be addressed. I think these are the only two comments I have. I suppose everybody will agree to that as well.
Yes, I'm sure. Yes, we all identify and recognize. It's very frustrating, but hopefully, with improving standards of living and things getting better, it is going to lead to change as well in terms of people wanting to be less corrupt. Because I mean, corruption is there universally. It's global. It's hidden in West. It's more obvious in India. But the need for it is greater in India because our social security systems are lacking. So people have nothing else but to have their own methods of creating their own pension pot, as it were. And corruption tends to be that method. But as things improve, as the economy improves and standard of living goes up, hopefully that will go down. But it is because it has become part of our habit, as it were, or culture, it will be hard to shift it, and it will take time.
Yes, my concern as an elderly person of 75, what you had said about the raised, this thing of the signage, I think that's a very good suggestion for us also to use here, because then it's a thing for the motorist to see that, okay, it's a pedestrian crossing. And I think that is a very worthy point. Now, I think we should bring up with the RTOs to raise that. It's a very good suggestion, I feel. Thank you very much. Pedestrians really have no right of way here, at least in Bangalore. Nowadays, I have seen, even if I'm crossing, even if I'm flogging down a vehicle, especially two-wheelers, they don't bother to stop. So I don't know. As you said, I think it's education and enforcement, that we have to start again from one block, first block, I think, then, then only can move to the second square. If you are still in the first square only.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's going to happen, and it will have to be done. Yeah.
Sandhya, can you take questions on the chat, please?
Sure, sir.
Okay.
I think Mr. Sudhir Pillai had a comment to make.
Yeah.
Admiral Pillai, do you want to?
Question in the chat from Mr. Pillai is.
Yes, thank you, Sandhya. My question was regarding enforcement. Recently the Motor Vehicle Act was amended to, bring certain stringency into the laws, but then the states have been allowed to dilute it. And so we have a system which actually permits all this. And the worst thing is educated people. I see a certain cynicism about everything here, So I think people need to understand that death, or especially of a near dear one under these circumstances, is something that should motivate people to do the right thing, but that doesn't happen. I would like to mention here that in 2010, I got in touch with Dr. Adhiraj Joglekar, got permission from him to reproduce his DVD and distributed it within my community, because we were losing people for nothing, educated people getting into silly road accidents. So how do we enforce this and try and improve things? My suggestion to the Bangalore Apartments Federation would be, can we at least start in our small little complexes? Let's at least enforce a helmet within that complex instead of we ourselves not wearing a helmet. So Dr. Adhiraj, would you like to give some pointers? Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you have mentioned is I'm aware through interactions with people that although the Motor Vehicle Act was amended and the fines were meant to be much more stringent, as you say, it has been watered down and states have been allowed to do whatever they want to do. And unfortunately, our leaders are, I think, over here, perhaps they need to carry the can, because they are devaluing life and giving politics and populism far greater weight. And that is where the problem lies, because it doesn't matter what political party we are from or what our ideology might be. If we all valued life, we wouldn't water down the change in the Motor Vehicle Act, which has come about after decades. It was long overdue. And then once we have got the change, to not actually implement it, then it's like taking the teeth away. It's the law. So that is, I feel, quite. I completely agree. However, we should not depend for change necessarily on big governments. It comes from big society, and that big society starts within our own pockets of our own neighborhoods and communities. And if, as a consortium of apartments, you bring about a change in a certain neighborhood, it will start to spill over, and it will, others will feel like the need to conform the examples that have been set. So rather than be affected by cynicism, because that is painful, and when there is pain and cynicism is part of that, we run, we hide, we avoid, we escape. So we give up on trying. Life is such, we want to value it and save every single one, and we can't afford cynicism, and every, even if it was a minor victory, even if it was a symbolic victory, it is important. I'll tell you an example. In 2005, where my parents live now in Pune, things came to such a bad place that they had to take a rickshaw to cross the road. They couldn't do it safely. There were no footpaths on what was essentially a 6-lane, 3 lanes on each side. Hardly any traffic lights were working. I actually walked a mile end to end, photographing, videographing, and sent a CD-ROM to the Pune Municipal Commissioner at the time. And specifically, it was a registered post, so I knew it has reached him. I specifically put the question to him: who is going to be responsible for a death on these roads for lack of infrastructure which we are meant to provide? He quickly responded, put me in touch with one of his subordinates for that particular ward, municipal ward, the engineer in charge. What did the engineer do? He called me for a meeting. He threw open a blueprint of a flyover that is going to happen in that area. And when that flyover happens, all the road vehicles will be on the flyover. So everything underneath will be safe. And I literally laughed. I said, first of all, I don't know when your flyover is going to happen. It's still not happening, by the way. It's already 15 years. But I said, this is not acceptable. If you created a road, the work is not finished until a footpath is built as well, right? So I went back to the commissioner and I kept hammering him, emails after emails. And he actually, in a week's time, then conceded and passed a budget of 40 lakhs for a stretch of 1 mile. Now you can imagine what quality of footpath you're going to get on it. But for the first time, that road actually, even if symbolically, managed to get a footway or a footpath. It was all sorts of heights. Every few feet, the height changed. For elderly people, sometimes you had to climb up on a 8-inch footway, then drop down suddenly, But because that was safeguarded for the first time, it stopped double parking, first of all. And now when the time came 2 years ago, when they had more funds, they revamped the footways and this time have done a far better job. So we cannot afford cynicism. If Gandhi had become cynical, continents wouldn't have been free today.
Thank you, Doctor. I think one of the challenges we have is this, to borrow a phrase from Mr. Raghunathan's book, Dashboard on the Ganesha on the Dashboard. Our concept is, he explains that you buy a shiny new car, do a puja and the whole celebration. After that, buy a plastic Ganesha, put it on your dashboard, and not actually give any focus on safety, which is your wearing your seat belts or having any airbags in your car. This is the fundamental problem with our with Indians. So that mindset needs to change for it to be to take safety as a primary importance.
And you put the same person, and I will put myself forth as an example. So my driving ability was no different to, any person who has lived their life in India, driven on the roads of India, until I came to UK. When I came here, I realized there's no way I could negotiate these roads without actually understanding the road culture and habits over here. The only way to do that was to get a driving instructor. I have about 60 to 80 hours training. I failed the first time myself, the exam. And that, however, is an experience of every person from the subcontinent who has gone, and whether they have lived in the UK or the US. When we are starting to drive on the roads in the UK, US, or anywhere else for that matter, we are managing to relearn our or give up our old habits. We are managing to reprogram ourselves and cultivate new habits, follow the rules. So it is doable. If we can do it in one environment, it is possible that we can recreate and do the same back home as well. It does need a massive collective effort from all sides. As individuals, we have to take responsibility, not conform with the bad habits, however big the pressure is on us. At the same time, we have to make authorities accountable, and we shouldn't let cynicism stop us from doing that.
Thank you, Dr.
Hello.
Mr. Nagaraj Rao has Malika, you can go next. Mr. Nagaraj Rao had a query. Sir?
Can I ask the question, Sandhya?
Yes, sir.
That same question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doctor, I believe that for any accident, it always needs two people. One is you and somebody else. And we normally blame somebody else without following without training our brain. My question is, just by leaving half an hour early to reach a destination on time and training our brain to suit that, would you think that would be a good suggestion for every driver, at least to understand, using his brain a bit to understand that he can reach very safe? Second question is, I was in Japan for about 5 months. After coming back, after knowing how they are driving, I wanted to allow my friend to go first. I started doing it, but there was a queue behind honking because I stopped. I had to push myself into the crowd and then push off. Kindly answer these questions. Don't mind.
Yeah. So I think the second question, in a way, we have already reflected on it. For example, we feel the pressure of conforming, and as you saw in that 3-minute video clip, just because everybody is doing a mindless activity, the initial people were all stooges, but the subsequent people were not stooges in that experiment. They just followed and copied. We feel the pressure of doing that, right? And you're giving a classic example that you want to keep up with the idea of following the rules, but the pressure around you is so much that we succumb and we go back to following the crowd. That is very much true. So that shift to occur will be gradual, but when that happens, it's something called 100th monkey syndrome, or reaching a critical mass. If 50% of the people start doing the right thing, the rest of the 50% will convert overnight almost. That change then is quantum. That initial change, however, takes much longer to achieve sometimes. And coming to your other question, the first part of the question, I'm thinking of one of my videos, in fact, on speed limits on YouTube. You will be able to see it. And in that video, I have tried to demonstrate through simple mathematical calculation. Speed is actually irrelevant on our daily, day-to-day, as far as day-to-day functioning and travel is concerned. On average, our commutes are 10 kilometers to 15 kilometers, right, in our cities, in our urban lives. The fastest mode of transport worldwide, under 8 kilometers or 5 miles, tends to be the cycle rather than a motor vehicle. That has been proved many times. The second is, when we are only traveling 15, 20, 30 kilometers distance, whether you go at 30 kilometers per hour or 40 kilometers per hour, the difference it makes in our lives is probably 2 or 3 minutes. It is not worth it. Speed speed is of relevance if we are traveling on a highway, intercity travel, instead of driving at 70, which is, or 80, that might be the maximum speed allowed. If someone decides to go at 50, then it will take half an hour, 45 minutes more. There the speed matters, but on a day-to-day, as far as day-to-day function is concerned, it is irrelevant. So your idea is fantastic. Give enough time, leave early, try and get to places early. One would never have to speed. And in any case, if you do the calculation, use the logical part of the brain rather than the emotional part of the brain, one can work out that extra speed actually doesn't add real value to our lives, and it endangers many lives at the same time. So it's not worth it.
Thank you,
Hello.
Doctor. Yeah, Malika, can you?
Yeah, my name is Malka.
Sorry.
And I'm coming from Israel. No, it's fine. I'm coming from Israel and I live in India for the last 10 years. As a child, when I was in the 6th grade, around 12 years old, the school had a very special project for children. They paired us and they took us to the road, especially next to zebra crossing, and they put 2 children with the supervision of a teacher. They gave us special clothes so the cars can see us from a distance. They gave us a stop sign with a stick, and they put us like police traffic, but children, of course, pupils. And we actually learned so much through that. We were part of road safety. We learned for the future. I am raising children in India, and I live in one of the societies here. I wanted to know what is your view of this concept to apply it in the society, because it is much more safer. And why am I saying that? Because I truly agree with you what you said about the curriculum, and that we have to emphasize and we have to put more efforts about the education rather than the re-education.
I completely agree. Thank you for your comment and observations. Very useful to also have that external perspective, your experience of coming from another country like Israel, very, very valuable. And 2 weeks ago, when I was doing this presentation in Maharashtra and Pune for the road safety officers there, the RTO officers in training, we had other people on the panel, speakers as well. One of them was a charity called Kids Safe. And what the Kids Safe charity is doing is actually what you just described, which is to go into schools and create an education program around road safety, right? And we interacted, and you want to make it really lively for the child to remember, isn't it? And so we talked about the kind of example which is to actually do it in situ rather than in vitro. We don't want to create lab rats. We want people to learn and be educated in the real life environment. So taking them out on the road is really of great value. And similarly, simulation. You can use playgrounds. You can use white markers or that we use for lane marking when they are running their races, for example, school races, or football markings and things like that, goalkeeping and all that. And you can create temporary roads on the playgrounds and explain the concept of who is the major road user, who is a minor road user, what kind of signages they need to start to appreciate and learn when they are walking back home. So a lot can be done. And in fact, it is not that in principle, if you look at the Constitution of India, the democracy, has a very solid basis, the Constitution of India. And very similarly, our schools, as a kid, I was part of road safety patrol rather than the cadets. And I think RSP was the short acronym for it. Probably schools do continue to have something similar. But what did we do as part of road safety patrolling? We were used basically for managing big crowds during Ganesh festival or something like that. We weren't actually helped to learn what we were meant to learn as a part of improving road safety for everyone. So that again, your valuable suggestion can become very lively part of growing up for kids, learning the right things in school environments. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
We have seen that in a lot of army schools, even in Bangalore, wherever I visited, because I go there to see the trees, the tree walk, heritage tree walk. They have it already there, even in the school yards. They have it. A lot of big schools in Bangalore also, they have already inculcating in the students, and they also encourage them to take part in the traffic posts. They're not left there alone, but there is a traffic constable. Along with them, the senior kids like 10th and 12th or plus 12, I think that may be a compulsory curriculum, as ma'am said, maybe improving, because from childhood days, you are sort of, trained, your mind is trained, okay, these are the safety rules. Because otherwise, we see our youngsters now really, especially the two-wheelers, it's scary. The speeds that they go, the wheelies that they do on the roads. I think, as she rightly said, from an young age, it has to be disciplined mind. Okay, this is what, take care of ourselves also more than the rider, even though other people on the road. I think it's a very good suggestion, Sandhya and Mr. Nagaraj. I think we should take it up with larger communities where the PTA meetings are held for the school kids. I think this point has to be brought up, because we are allowing children from 12 years. I've seen them on the road with a two-wheeler, without a helmet, without a license. The parents are at fault. Why should they have to give the key to the child? They also have to be responsible citizens of Bangalore, right? We can't only blame the kids. Even the parents are also equally responsible to take control of their child. Just because the child wants sun, moon, and star, can you give it at 12 years? No. So I think it's an overall responsibility of everybody, or the citizenry actually, to be more conscious of the road safety thing and how one has to conduct themselves on the roads for the safety of everybody. And I don't know, doctor, whether you agree with this white topping and they're doing all these fancy footpaths and all that. I don't know, that means it reduces the width of the street, but it gives more attention to the footpath users, so the walkers. You think that is maybe a good thing for Bangalore now to follow? We have been following that in certain roads.
Yes, so generally, my preference, my belief has been through experience and through reading and interacting with a lot of experts over the years, that if we prioritize the footpaths and get that infrastructure right, then the rest of it will follow generally. What we have is we have got it the other way around. We are working the wrong way. We have to think of our priorities first. And people will walk if there were footways. They will not necessarily take their vehicles out if there was the right kind of transport available. What we have done is, we have tended to copy paste. Sometimes we have gone abroad, looked at some models, and then someone has come and decided to just implement something out of the blue, and then implement it very poorly. And I think the experience BRTS was very much that in many places. And the funding never quite came along with it. Whereas when you talk of metro, it has to be backed by a massive amount of funds. So the implementation tends to be better. Not necessarily that metro is necessary, but the implementation tends to be better, so the success is better.
Yes, but metro, at least even in London and all, wherever I travel, they kept the greenery. Generally, everything goes below surface. So you still have greenery, when you come out of that tunnel, it is so lovely to see the greenery. Here, unfortunately, we are digging, the hole is to dig, the roads are dug up for metro. So, which is also leading to a lot of congestion of traffic. You don't know. Suddenly there is a diversion.
Madam, there are so many questions. Let others also ask questions. Kindly allow them. Sandhya, please take over.
Thank you.
I'll just mention a quick point on the metro system, and you compared it with London. And if you, in fact, London is a very interesting example that you bring up, because a lot of it is underground. It meant that you could actually cut across the existing commuter belts, and you could make new connections because you are not being restricted by the overground terrain and overground buildings and infrastructure that is already in place. What we have done in India is actually we have taken a shortcut because it is cheaper. What we have done, we have taken the widest roads available and decided to create a metro along those roads, essentially duplicating the same commuter belt. We have not created new commuter belts. And that leaves then the bigger question of feeder or last minute connectivity as well. So I think it is challenging. It will improve things for a while on those commuter belts, but it is not necessarily going to resolve everything.
Murli, I think you had a point to make.
Yeah, Doctor, I just was making a point. I mean, in Bangalore, all the the transport infrastructure, everything is designed by people who generally don't use public transport. They are all using cars only. Not are they just using cars. I mean, it is from door to door they travel by car and chauffeur-driven cars. So because of which they have no idea of what the problems of the pedestrian are. Even after the metro is now passing through Vidhan Saudha, if you go any day to Vidhan Saudha, you will see the number of cars. Even for the section heads, you have chauffeur-driven cars. Even now, when you have a metro service, now I suppose the answer to that is all the cars have to be, I mean, only to the very top IAS officers or something, then you should allot the official cars. The rest all should be made to commute at least by public transport. That's the only way. And because they are traveling by these things, they have no idea of what the pedestrians' problems are, and they are not bothered with them at all either. So that has to change. Thank you. I was just making a point.
Thank you for your comment. I completely agree.
Shankar, you had a point.
Hey, Sandhya, actually, I put my points, what I wanted to say. I really have gone through this experience of defensive driving. I mean, when I was working for Shell in Qatar, and every year I had to renew our driving license, the official Qatari license that had to be renewed. We had to undergo a defensive driving course. That's through videos as well as desktop training sessions, and then a physical, I mean, demonstration of how we brake and all that. Some of the points that Dr. Adhiraj mentioned, these I have also experienced, and it really makes a lot of difference. But the unfortunate thing is, I have been finding it pretty challenging in driving in Bangalore with that background. So as he says, no, it probably tends to dilute your own skills in abiding by those defensive driving habits. That's it.
Thank you.
Ms. Sheetal Kulkarni, she had a query.
Good, I think you had a nice time.
Yeah, hi. I have seen that in Pune we have different lanes that are demarcated for maybe bus, for two-wheelers. So does this concept actually help us to manage the traffic better? And should we adapt, like, should all the cities adapt this kind of technology, like,
My short answer would be that it would work and it would help. However, the long answer comes back to the implementation. So the BRTS in Pune failed miserably. The cycle lanes have failed to a great extent, not for the lack of the aspirations of the NGOs, local NGOs, because they are working very hard to try and get cycling back on Pune. It used to be a city of cyclists, like Cambridge still is in the UK, for that matter. But the implementation, because when you talk of demarcating for different vehicles, there is a science behind it. It is not about just putting a line through and saying that's the end of it. Because when people introduced BRTS in Pune, the people who are implementing did not understand the basic difference between a closed system BRT versus an open system BRT. Right? An open system BRT is not going to work easily until you have very profound, powerful technology to back it up. And in my YouTube collection of videos, you will see the concepts of contraflow bus lanes. You will see the concept of pre-signal technology being used. So they don't have dedicated bus lanes in London because the road width is very narrow for a city like London, which is so old. But even on those narrow roads, they have introduced bus lanes very successfully because they have managed to think about it scientifically and use technology and use enforcement alongside. Then it is a feasible concept. Otherwise, it is going to fail.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Sandhya,
Dr.
all the questions are over?
Yeah,
Over?
looks like.
I would like to add something. Can I?
Sure, please go ahead.
Doctor, it was a wonderful session. We really enjoyed. I just want to add a small anecdote or a joke. I have been visiting Dubai quite some time, and I take a cab, and I normally keep the driver engaged in conversation. He happened to be a Keralite, Indian, and I asked him, the roads are so fine, the driving is so good in your case, but how do you drive it when you come to India? You know, the reply given was, sir, please don't blame me, I hire a driver. That was the reply. So that is it. And as a part of the educating the people, in fact, I took the initiative of requesting my friend Praveen Sood, who is the chief of police in Karnataka, to allow our kids in our apartment to visit the police control room and try to understand how it is done. It was a good education. I think we should try to put it across through the apartment federation and find out if this could be a regular program. How do you respond, Doctor?
Yeah, I completely agree, because if it's a regular program, then it is going to work better because you're reinforcing and giving the same message consistently again and again. The other example, by way of a joke that you mentioned, is also a great example because I actually can relate to it, right? Because when I come to India, visit my parents, I no longer have an active Indian driving license. So I can't drive on the Indian roads because I don't have a license, valid license. So what I have to do is, obviously, as you mentioned, I have to depend on other people, hire vehicles, and have a driver who will drive the vehicle. And typically, my experience has been either I keep quiet and let this person do all sorts of dangerous things, or I speak up. So I have taken the option of educating whenever possible in the nicest possible way. At the simplest level, I have had drivers driving me from Bombay to Pune airport to home to my parents. They are not using Bluetooth and hands-free. I have said to them that if you have to make calls or if you have to answer calls, you're going to have to stop somewhere before you do it. Secondly, on another occasion, I noticed it comes out of habit, but it comes out of education. You know, you have to make your rain checks before you take a long distance travel in your car, because if you're going to break down, that's the last thing you want. You know, for the kind of trouble and expense it's going to cause you. So I go around the vehicle. On one occasion, I could see that the tire was not up to scratch. You know, it was deflated compared to the other three. And I had to insist that I will only go in another car or the person has to change the tire. So it took me some hassle to get it done, but it was sorted because the company then found another driver with another vehicle. But my safety was paramount for everyone. You know, it was not just my safety. If the car skid or had a puncture, doing 80 kilometers per hour on the expressway, it can cause a lot of dangers for a lot of people. The other last point I will mention is the dipped lights. People don't put dipped lights on in India until it becomes very dark. Now new vehicles automatically they come on because they are sensor driven. Okay, so when I raised this once with one of the drivers, he said, "But sir, I can see what is in front of me. Why should I put my lights on?" Now that is a matter of education and defensive driving. I said it's not about what you can see, because the dipped lights are not always about helping you as a driver to see what is ahead of you. It is actually more relevant for you to be seen by people around you, particularly long distance, because those lights are going to be picked up by someone ahead of you coming in the opposite direction, the pedestrians. So it is not just about seeing, but it is about being seen by others. And then the last one was similarly, when we go into tunnels in India, everyone suddenly puts on their hazard lights. Now that is the wrong thing to do, because they are flashy, they can blind people. It's what is required is to put your dipped lights, because then your front and the back lights are on automatically rather than hazard lights. Hazard means there has to be a real hazard and a danger. So I think people have cultivated some habits. They see someone ahead of you, suddenly start hazard lights, everyone start hazard lights, when what is required is the dip lights to be put on. So I try to use every opportunity to inform and help improve things. We should not be apologetic if we find ourselves in a position of imparting our and sharing our knowledge base with other people. I think we should not stop. We should try and do that quite freely.
Thank you,
Sandhya?
Doctor. Yeah, I think one last question by Admiral Pillai. After that, we'll close the session. It's already 1.5 hours. We are keeping the doctor on a Sunday.
My pleasure.
Yeah, Dr. Joglekar, one last question is, this is for many of us who drive around here in Bangalore. Would you like to highlight the importance of wearing a seat belt in the rear seat? I'm not talking about the front seat, especially when we drive out into the highways and all, because I'm quite sure very few people, if at all, wear a seat belt in the rear seat. I wear a seat belt in the rear seat after my son was involved in an accident and he went through a window pane. Okay, so would you be able to tell something to even these few people who are left, how we should be doing the right thing?
Yes, absolutely. And to get a bad injury, you don't have to be thrown through a window. And you're right that backseat passengers, when you are a driver, if they were driving at a certain speed, like say 40, 50 kilometers per hour, and they suddenly had to brake for whatever reason, and the people behind are not wearing the seat belt, they can be literally thrown through the windscreen in the front, straight out of the car. I mean, that is as serious as it can get, including leading to fatality with not severe injury. But you don't have to experience that. You only have to experience a little forward jerk, to get a whiplash injury, and that can cause enough cervical or vertebral bone damages, sometimes leading to, thankfully, no longer not a lot than a backache that can put you out for 2 weeks. But again, if you're unlucky, that can lead to paralysis. It can lead to nerve damage. It can lead to sensory nerve damage or motor neuron nerve damages and so on. So people don't understand how seat belts work. When we sit in the car and if you put the seat belt across, right? If you gently pull the seat belt, it will go all the way in front of you, right? And as far as you can take. So if you think that the seat belt can stretch as far out, how can it be safe? It is pointless, right? But then if you have the seat belt latched on and you give it a sharp jerk, you can see it will not go forward anymore when there is that sharp jerk on the seat belt. That mechanism people have to actually witness and experience to appreciate how important a seatbelt can be if the driver was to hit the brake suddenly. We have to make the education very vivid, in my view. So then it stands out. It is much more powerful. So I don't know whether I have necessarily explained the concept, verbally, but obviously if people go ahead and try it, they might realize it's very easy to work out why seatbelts are important.
Thank you, Doctor. It's already more than 1.5 hours. I'm sorry we took such a long time, but I think this was a very important topic to reach out to a lot of people. I hope we can do sessions like that in Bangalore as well to our traffic police. I think there's a lot of learning which needs to be given to them as well, because a lot of this one they'll mug up and or do it mechanically without really understanding why they need to do it. I think that education is very important, be it for general public like us or even the traffic police themselves.
Yes, thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. It has been a very interactive Q&A, and it has brought up a number of suggestions, which I hope you can take forward collectively. I know that a couple of you in the audience have had association with me from before, and I'll be very happy to stay in touch and do my bit and contribute in any way. So I have some CD-ROMs, for example, on hazard perception tests and the test norms as well in the UK, the CD-ROMs that are used by people. I can always arrange to pass them on or make copies of those if it's going to help. Thank you.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. See you next week. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.